conversation. We met a few years ago, and I think we didn't really get to know each other as well as I feel like we've been able to by way of connecting about this topic, healthy. And it's definitely, taught me a little bit more about you. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and help them understand some of the context in your life that helps shape the perspective for you around this topic.
So I came to real estate by way of sustainability. When I was in high school, I did a trip and to Costa Rica and was in the cloud forest. And that was really the trigger for me to say, hey, I really am seeing what people are doing to the rainforest and to the environment. And I want to do something to impact that and to help it. And that's what was really the start of what I consider to be my career journey. I went to college for natural resources and really learned there the system thinking, right? It's the idea of how one thing can impact so many other things that you're not even really expecting, right? Like I think of the Dr. Seuss book. I don't know if you know this, like the little, is it the little bug went ka-choo, right? And this little bug sneezes and then all of these crazy things happen. And then next thing you know, right, there's like chaos in, Seuss land. And so it's really just how everything impacts and may have unexpected consequences elsewhere, and having that systems mindset to think about all of that interconnection. And so when I left college, I decided to pursue a law degree because where the environmental law stood at the time, a lot of it was toxic torts, etc. But I really felt that having a law degree would keep people honest, right? So contracts and having something that helps govern a relationship would help say, this is what we're going to do so that everybody's on the same page. This is what we're going to do. This is what our rights are. And this is what you're going to expect from us as well. And so the beginning of my legal career focused on, venture capital, corporate law, and different things to really understand how companies work. And I ultimately came to real estate and decided to focus on that. Carbon emissions buildings account for 40% of the carbon emissions. And decided, okay, well, that is really a place that I can make an impact. So I came to Pfizer, where I focused on real estate. And Pfizer has a really dynamic real estate portfolio. We have commercial sites, we have research and development labs, manufacturing sites, distribution centers, right? So, so many different types of real estate, and they all have different operational needs and different real estate needs. Over my time at Pfizer, my mindset has shifted, right? It's expanded in terms of how I think about real estate. So at first when I came, I thought, okay, you buy, sell real estate, it's 4 walls and a ceiling, and it's a box. But then being within a company and having the end user mindset, the occupier mindset of real estate, you begin to see how it's an operational need, right? In terms of how can a company operate and be successful? Well, you need your real estate, especially if you have labs or manufacturing plants, you need that in order to be able to do your work. But it's also kind of how efficient is it and how does it impact the people inside? But in addition to having that operational need, it's personal. I mean, if I see people that get so worked up over, okay, when it comes to real estate, when we were doing our headquarters move and we first started preparing for it, that's when everybody cared about real estate, right? Is because it affects them personally. It's kind of how is your personal day impacted? And so that's really the experience, right, of real estate. So, going back, for a minute to your initial question, which is how come I care about the healthy building thing? So, when I first came to Pfizer and we were looking at how can buildings become more sustainable? How can they be more green? And there was resistance to it, right? Because it wasn't as big, there wasn't as big of a movement at the time. ESG wasn't really a thing yet. Companies didn't have net zero goals. It really became much more of an operational issue, right? In terms of risk. So I decided that in order to get management and leadership to listen to the sustainable need, like the need for sustainability, we needed to have a business case, right? Because it all, in business, it boils down a lot of the time to financials. So I researched and to look into what elements of LEED, which is the Green Building Standard, and others, sustainability features of a building matter. And I discovered that the energy savings from sustainability are about 4 times as much as, regular building at the time. But the indoor air quality impacts are 10 times having a regular building. So translated, right, is that things like having better lighting, better temperature controls, having better airflow in the building, all of that results in higher pay from the workers. There's less absenteeism, so people are not staying home with feeling sick from the buildings that they're in. There also is less presenteeism in terms of like when people come in and they're not really paying attention because their brains are clearer, right? If you've ever been in a meeting, an all-day meeting, and then around, a little bit after lunch, everybody starts getting tired, it's not necessarily because you have food coma or because the speaker's boring. It could also be because the air is getting stale and there's less oxygen in the room. So that, for me, was like a real aha moment, because what it did was it pulled together what I'd been seeing, which was the operational impact of the real estate, and tied it much more closely with the people and being able to understand how a building can really shape the health and engagement of the workforce.
It's incredible, and it really goes to the question I was going to ask you, which is, how does real estate impact success?
Right.
And I don't even need to ask that question because you did such a beautiful job of explaining. And I think, what comes up a lot in this show is this feeling that people have from a space that they don't even necessarily correlate with the space itself, but they either feel really great or they feel not so great. Like you're kind of saying, they may just feel like you said, I ate a big meal, or, whatever it is that they're, thinking. But sometimes it's as minute or kind of detailed as the air that you may not even consider. I do want to dovetail to kind of something that you kind of uniquely are able to talk about, but that's the kind of how real estate is intertwined with this, human psychology and human interaction.
Yeah. So I think real estate is, like I mentioned before, is personal in the sense that it is the occupant's lived experience, right? So you said it perfectly. It's how it makes you feel, right? What do they say? Like, it doesn't matter what you say, it's how you feel. It's how do you feel in a space. And I think that healthy buildings have the opportunity to help colleagues and the occupants feel both included and supported, right? So if you have something like inclusive design, which is a big element in healthy building, which is thinking about who's coming through and how everybody that's in the space is different, and whether they have a physical or an invisible difference, right? So they could be ADHD, they could be in a wheelchair, right? So those kinds of differences need to be addressed through design with a wider hallway so the wheelchair can get through. Or maybe you need a doorknob that isn't something that's hard to turn, somebody whose hand can't grasp it, right? So all of those types of elements come into play for physical, but then also on the invisible differences, we all learn differently. Somebody's an auditory learner, somebody's, visual, somebody might like working in a loud space or in a quiet space. So having spaces, workplaces allow for that type of diversity in personality and needs. That to me is really where you get a truly healthy building.
It's you bring such a scope to what it could mean to have a healthy building, a healthy workplace, feel healthy in your workplace. You did touch on something that is, I would say, probably the biggest roadblock for implementing a lot of these things, which is that business case.
Yeah.
So what are some of the measurements of success that you feel like are maybe those lowest hanging fruit opportunities for people to consider implementing from a business case?
Yeah. So I do think that the business case, right? It's still there. There's still a need for it. In some ways, it gets taken away, or at least the need for it gets taken away by regulation, right? So if you think about environmental regulation and ESG, net zero, there was a lot of resistance to putting in changes. But in the long term, right, you have regulations that are requiring it. So companies have no choice, right? Or else they might suffer from fines or penalties, right? Same thing with ADA, for example, right? If you don't comply with ADA, the American Disability Act, then you can suffer fines. So that's really much more of the have to camp, right? But then on the business case side for the why, right? You have the reputational reasons, right? So helps your reputation with potential employees, and so that helps with recruitment. And then on the retention side, right? If your colleagues are feeling that they can do their best work in the space, then that helps with the retention. And so the tricky part is how do you measure that? Right. And there's a lot of pop-up, different ways to measure it. There's different companies that are looking at measuring it. I'm on the International Well Building Institute, which is the developer of the WELL standard, which is the standard for healthy buildings. I'm on one of their advisories, Investing for Health, and they're really looking at shaping and figuring out how do you measure that S? Because that very well may be the next frontier, right? We've seen in the last probably 5 years, the E balloon up, right? There's now so much measurement and people looking at measuring carbon. So how do we start looking at how to measure that S? And I do think that the answer will be in productivity, in engagement scores, absenteeism, presenteeism, all those things that I had mentioned before, that those figure into the business case.
I think in a lot of times it also, the measurements of success matter from country to country, probably different offices, different use cases for the real estate, like you mentioned in the beginning. So I imagine that there are probably, and each company also, like the ethos of each company probably is geared towards a different potential measurement of success.
Absolutely. I mean, it has to tie together with your mission and your values in order to make sense. I mean, for Pfizer, in some ways, it's an easy tie-in, right? Because we're a company that's looking, to help patients, and, what better patients are there than your employees?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we mentioned it in the beginning, but I want to make mention that Laurie is joining us today as Laurie, with all the incredible experience that she brings, and she doesn't represent the thoughts and feelings of the company at large that she does work for. Did I say that properly, Laurie?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So we're so grateful to have you here, because you get to practice the things that you, first of all, are passionate about, but the things that are so helpful and useful for the people who are going to be listening to this. And I hope that we can connect some dots in a bigger way for the audience. So, and I do like to talk about what are the opportunities. So not just what are those business cases, because I do think the business case gets a lot of people who are passionate like yourself through the door of saying yes to
Absolutely.
trying some sort of, wellness program or new initiative. for the hope that it creates more productive employees and things like that. But I think that there are not so many people that get to really say, hey, I'm practicing this. So I appreciate you sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you see as kind of like those biggest opportunities? Like, what are the things that if you're not doing it right now, like at least start looking into this because it's such an opportunity.
Yeah. So I think that there's great opportunity on the physical workplace. A lot of what we've already talked about in terms of the elements that companies can incorporate into their workspaces, whether it be things like the airflow, and the lighting, biophilia, which is having features that reflect and look like nature. For example, Pfizer's headquarters is WELL Platinum, which is the highest level of the WELL standard. And, we have open spaces. We have, terraces at our headquarters that colleagues can go outside, get a breath of fresh air and enjoy some sunshine, get some vitamin D. And also, living walls where we have greenery on the walls. And it could even be something as simple as tile that looks like it's rocks or that looks like it's a beehive because it makes you think of nature. So there's studies that say that even looking at a tree can reduce your levels of stress. So having those types of elements in your workspace is a good start. I think where the best practice is going is looking to align how you're working with where you're working. And that's where the workplace will really truly be healthy workplace. So let me explain.
Give me an example.
Sure. So do your ways of working support where you are? For example, like if you are, you could have a beautiful space. You could have all of the elements that we've mentioned that are healthy building, but you could have a killer work culture where people work around the clock and don't get that chance to relax and rejuvenate. So for example, if we have wellness rooms here, or if you have, break rooms for people to connect, if everybody's heads down working really hard and you don't have the opportunity to use that, then you've lost the benefit of what you were trying to build. So, like if you have lighting, for example, that goes up and down with sometimes there's circadian lighting, which follows the way that the lighting is in the sky, right? Where it gets brighter as the day goes on around noon, 2 o'clock, it's brightest and then starts to fade down so that occupants would start, naturally winding down. But if your culture is go, go, go through till midnight, there's an internal conflict and people will sense that and they'll feel it. So I think to me, the real opportunity is aligning both of them. And for that, really need to have a partnership and a healthy relationship between human resources and real estate.
How much of a connection do you see being bridged actively? Or is there more of like a pushback where it's like, okay, we used to make these decisions by ourselves. And like now we're forced to kind of come together. And I can imagine that there may be some competing interests, but how much of that is like working and are you seeing some of the challenges as a result?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that so about 4 years ago, we moved our real estate group from the finance organization into we call HR people experience. So we moved it into that. And I really see almost a sense of welcome and a sense of relief, right? Because people, both organizations understand that the two are intertwined. So I think it's been a good relationship. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm seeing other companies, right? When I talk to colleagues at other companies, they're similarly partnering with human resources. And I think it's a partnership that is welcome by both sides.
I think it's incredible, and it just gives that understanding of this company is taking a people-driven approach. And it's no different than, over the last maybe 10 years, we've started to see the technology, department, the CIOs, the heads of IT, the heads of engineering start to make choices with the real estate team. Like, hello, of course we have to be working together. So now you add HR and it's like, why weren't we doing this the whole time? This just helps us do our job better together. So I think it's really cool. And I'm glad to hear that it's a really welcome and positive experience, because that helps things get done. I want to pivot to some of these kind of new terms that are being thrown around, like green leases, green design. What are those things? Are they things that people should be paying attention to? Are they just kind of more like green stuff that maybe isn't really here to stay, and is it kind of thin? What are they? Green leases, green design. What does that mean?
Yeah, so green design is includes a lot of the elements that I had mentioned, at least on the people side, but it also thinking at the design of your space and thinking about how can we be the most efficient, right? From a carbon electricity perspective, from a water use, waste, right? And also, how can we think about the local communities that we are impacting with our space? So that's green. To me, that's green design. In both green design and in green leasing, my philosophy is that it's almost a branding problem, right? Because if you call it, if ESG is hot, right, and everybody's, on board and in favor of it, call it ESG, call it green lease, call it green design. Well, really what it boils down to, it's smart design, it's smart leasing, it's efficient, and it's thinking about the future. So what a green lease does is a green lease thinks about, we want, the tenant may say, well, we want to put into place certain elements in our space, right? Because when you lease a space, you have, the building, which is the landlord's, and then your space as the tenant. You can do whatever you want in your, within your premises. So in a green lease, you're getting the ability to be able to make maybe the changes within your space and to be able to influence what's happening in the broader building, because that may impact your operating costs in the long term, right? Because if, for example, if the landlord puts into place an HVAC unit for the building and it's an energy hog, well, then your energy costs are going to inherently be higher, right? And you're going to be using more carbon through that. So you want to be able to influence their choice of equipment, right? So that, it's more, it's better for you in the longer term, both from a cost and a carbon perspective. And so green lease looks at, okay, from the landlord's perspective, because some of our landlords really want to push green leases, and some of our tenants do. And so both parties are looking at, okay, what do I want the other side to do? What do I want to be able to do myself? And the kicker, right, is of course, who's going to pay for it? And a green lease will look at, okay, how does that get allocated so that both parties have the incentive to be able to say, I'm going to make that investment so that, I get at least some of the payback.
It does sound mutually beneficial both for the occupier and the landlord, but I imagine it's more complicated than that. And of course, just like each building is its totally own complex, situation, I imagine that each of these could get a little hairy. Are there some bigger challenges or like patterns that you've heard about or noticed in the industry as it relates to adopting this kind of lease? Because it seems like it just makes sense.
Yeah, I think that, green lease was a big point of conversation maybe about, I think like 10, 12 years ago, where people were trying to come up with language so that, the costs were split in a agreeable way, like from both sides. Where I see leasing go now, and when we've seen the more sophisticated landlords wanting to partner with us, is both parties agreeing to say, we're going to make choices that benefit, net zero, that try to achieve net zero. And we're going to make improvements, and you, tenant, you'll pay for this over the course of the usable life, right, of the equipment. So I see, there is pushback in terms of the obligation, like of having to promise things, but there is still much more of an intent to do right, because the landlords need it from their investor side, and the companies need it also, right, to fulfill their promises.
Right.
I did want to say one more thing about the green leasing, if I can, is that a lot of the focus, right, in terms of green leasing tends to be on what types of features are they incorporating. My philosophy is that it really is about flexibility. It's about how can we make sure that this lease, over the life of the term of the lease, allows companies to bend and flex to their needs. So it'll cover other things like subletting, assignment, things like that.
So I do want to cover, because you're the perfect person to talk about this with. I want to talk about amenities, but I want to talk about like baseline stuff, like what is expected kind of by employees, especially as like the last 2 years, we need a better reason to be in the office and a more supportive reason to be in the office. But then on a bigger scale, like what are the above and beyond things that people might not even know could potentially be offered in their workplace or in their building?
Yeah. So I think the table stakes, LEED certification is much more of table stakes. And what we're seeing so much more is, you can call it open plan, activity-based working, right, where there are a lot of different types of workspaces. And that gets back to when we were talking earlier about how different people have different needs throughout the day. So we do think that the designs tend to incorporate that much more regularly. I see that in the market as almost table stakes, because the employees are looking for something that competes with their home office, right? They're looking for, okay, why should I come in if I have this great space at home? So it needs to have the collaboration, the in-person collision, right? The way that it's laid out, so that it has those collisions. And it needs to be able to accommodate both that heads down work and also the bigger conferences. In terms of wellness, I see, much more coming into play. Stairways, the concept of let's get our employees to walk, right? Let's get them to move throughout the day. I mean, I've seen, right, the fashion code of the office has changed, where most people have cool sneakers now, not really high heeled shoes, right? So it's just
talk about this. I was just talking about this, and I think it's really interesting. Cool, good, bad, different. Everyone has their own feelings. But gone are the days of you are a commercial real estate professional and you need to show up in a 3-piece suit. I'll just say that. I know you're not talking about just our industry, but generally. So please talk about that.
Yeah. I'm talking footwear, right? Because I clock so many more steps in a day that I come into the office than I do on the days that I work from home. So there really is kind of a built-in benefit to that type of a design. I think the higher, right, you have a flight to quality right now. And so where companies are looking for better spaces, they're not necessarily looking for bigger spaces, but they're looking for better quality spaces. And so the traction is going to be with what elements of a healthy design can be done at either a low price point or a high price point. And so I think that some of those things, like the activity-based working, maybe the increased workflow, right? You have to figure out where's your best bang for your buck in terms of the dollar savings, and where can you make those design choices that not necessarily going to cost that much more. Now, then when you have like the best in class is when you have maybe like we have this wonderful terrace. Not everybody can necessarily afford that, right? Not every company, but it's a wonderful thing and a wonderful amenity to have. And I was just going to add one more thing is that I what I think is wonderful is that a lot of the sophisticated landlords are filling that gap. So for a lot of the tenants that maybe don't have the deep pocketbook or that just don't have the size that they can afford some of these amenities, the landlords are now offering that, right, as part of their campuses.
The beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think one thing that really struck me when we had our conversation is, you know, a lot of the larger companies, even if they don't have the most space, they have these high quality spaces where they're offering a stack of amenities, some really truly incredible amenities. But I think, especially in really competitive places like New York City, where like productivity is like streaming, coursing through our veins, I think that it can be really hard for people to feel almost like permission or feel good about taking advantage of those amenities more than just, I'm going to go sit on the terrace and have my lunch and get some sun, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong. But how can companies help their people feel good about taking advantage of the resources that they're providing, and so that they can feel good about taking care of their health, sometimes even more so than they would if they were working from home, because they have access to all of these incredible things.
Yeah. And I love that you asked that, because I think that is, you know, the real bugaboo about these wonderful amenities is that they exist, but can I use them? Right. And so to me, it's part of management and leadership's responsibility to make it okay, make it a norm, right? It should be part of, yeah, I'm going to go, you know, be vocal about it. I'm going to go, you know, work out. I'm going to go for a walk. Why don't we turn this one-on-one into a walking meeting? Or let's, you know, set a call that is shorter by 5 minutes so that we can have a breather somewhere. I think it just has to be talked about and also demonstrated by leadership so that it becomes acceptable and almost expected that people are going to use these amenities.
I think I mean, as much as we can celebrate people taking care of themselves, the more that they'll feel inclined to do so, the happier they'll be, the more fulfilled they'll be, the better it will feel to be in the office. They may even make friends and engage with people with similar interests that has nothing to do with work, which is, I mean, you can't create better magic than that, especially as people are really starving for engagement and connection. And oftentimes, you know, our friends do come from work. The people that you see, I mean, maybe we're not going into the office every single day like we used to, although sometimes. But a lot of times you have your work friends and people who, you know, you connect with. So what better way to connect with people than through taking care of ourselves and getting those like few precious moments in together. So I think that's really cool. I don't want to forget to ask you.
Okay.
Just personally, like, what is one thing, it could be one thing that you do to take care of your own health, inside or outside of the workplace?
Yeah. So I think for me, a lot of it is figuring out where within the juggle that I can build it in. And so it's being realistic, right? It's changing my mindset to thinking, okay, am I really going to wake up and go to the gym for an hour in the morning? That's not necessarily feasible with, you know, 2 children and a dog and a job, etc. It's not really feasible necessarily with, you know, my job and 2 children and a dog. However, I can build it in, right? I can park a little further away. I can walk, you know, make sure that I walk the stairs rather than taking the elevator. I can build it in throughout my day. And I do it in little chunks, right? And then I find certain times where I'm able to take those bigger chunks. I make sure that I do that.
I mean, it's
hard.
And you also, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, and then I also communicate to my team that they should do that as well. And if they tell me that they're doing it, I respect it. I don't stomp on that time.
You don't punish them for
I don't punish them, no.
Told them to take, and you're hoping that it was like really fed them a little bit in the way that they need it. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, is there something that you are most excited to kind of see mature in this regard of the industry? Is there, some good optimism that we can inject into our listeners?
Yeah. What I love is that post-COVID, there's so much discussion about the employee experience. There's so much focus on human-centered design and just really designing the space with the employee and the occupants in mind. We see landlords doing it, we see lots of companies doing it, and there's studies in terms of like what's the best way for colleagues to work. Should they be home? Should they be in the office? My excitement is that I think of the experience as really part of the social pillar in the ESG and part of the health and wellness movement that you're discussing.
You want to say it again? Part of the health and wellness.
Yeah, I don't. Right.
Yeah, you're fine. Start over.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Everything okay?
Yeah. No, and I guess whatever. Okay.
Why you feel alert? Not what your alerts sound like during the day. It sounds like an elevator.
This is my home computer. Because
you know the noise that the elevator tries to make when it's closing, but then like something's in the way? That can't be your real alert. Stop it.
Yeah, it's the text
alert. Computer talk to you
and it's on Do Not Disturb, but I think apparently favorites make it through. I told him to stop texting. So where was I? All right.
We were talking about
So basically, I'm really excited because I view the wellness movement as going hand in hand with this focus on ESG, like the S pillar of ESG, and with the focus on employee experience. Because really, when you come to work and you hit technology issues, or you can't find a room, or you can't, figure out how to, work a machine at, have different technology issues. Those types of mini frustrations, they build up over the course of the day. And then you get an email from somebody, or you're dealing with some, difficult work issue. That then multiplies because you're already kind of feeling that friction from before in terms of your experience. And so if you kind of work together to figure out work your work the way that, let me restart.
Okay. I will cut out all these like gaps and things like that. So don't just in 1 second. Seriously, don't just.
Okay.
Start.
Okay. So let me just start over again with that whole question, I think. So what I'm really excited about is that post-COVID, there's been this incredible focus on the employee experience. There's a lot of talk about human-centered design and the power of the employee, right? In terms of how the dynamic has shifted, where employees are demanding certain things in the workplace. And I view that as really talking about what are employees saying it's going to make them feel good? What is going to make them feel healthy? What is going to make them, right, be able to bring their best self to work? And so if designers and, workplace executives and right, real estate groups look at that and think about it, and human resources, right, and think about what is best for the employees, then you're resulting in getting a more engaged employee who then also takes it home and has better interactions at home. And then, that's been shown to, have ripple effect, right, to the children and the way that they grow up and the way that they learn, right? Better workforce down the road, more resilient workforce down the road, right? So it really all comes back together. And ties in with the wellness, the employees, and then you have a healthy workforce, they're going to help the company be successful in the long term.
Every time I do one of these episodes, I'm reminded how much responsibility we have in this industry. And it's such a great opportunity, I think, as well, like what you're talking about. And I think more and more science-backed conclusions about these ripple effects, the more we'll be able to get done. But the fact that we're able to help somebody have a great day or not support them enough, and then their day will be whatever maybe is in their control, or maybe some things that are not even in control, that they don't even understand the correlation of how it's affected them that day. And then they go home and it's a ripple effect into the rest of their life and the choices that they're going to make when they get home. That hour that maybe you didn't want to work out at home because you have other responsibilities, naturally, many people do. Maybe you feel okay to get 30 minutes at lunch or 45 minutes after work or whatever it is at the office, and you go home and you're an entirely, different kind of attention that's able to focus then on, your family or whatever, or your hobbies, whatever it is. So I think it's just such an incredible responsibility, and I don't know that we talk about that enough in this industry, like how much we're able to affect people's lives. And I think you said it really, really well. And it's just such an interesting point. I just can't thank you enough for sharing with us and just being so, honest and transparent, but also passionate about working in this space. I think that there are not enough people that work in this space that are so passionate and that have clear reasons. They don't have a clear why for why they want to be here and the impact that they really could have. I don't think people realize when they're working in this industry, the impact they really could have. And it's the same thing that you said in the beginning, that this industry contributes 40% to global carbon emissions. 40% of all global carbon emissions are attributed to commercial buildings and construction waste. And we have power to change that figure. So the more people we have, thank God, we have Laurie working with us in this industry, and hopefully some more of the guests that you guys see in this show, they're all like-minded, and we can really bring forth the leaders that are championing this aspect of the industry, because it's so important, not just for the planet, but for the people, those kind of microcosms of what it feels like in somebody's day to be at the office. I mean, wow. So we don't really need to say anything else. I think we did a great job. And by we, I mean you. Thank you. I did my best listening, because this was really, really great. So I can't wait to share it. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
We'll put in the description where people can find you and connect with you. So,
okay. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be here.